"Pretend to be my betrothed at the Christmas ball," the Duke of Ormsgill said, "and I will settle your father's debts and see you never want for anything again. But I have one condition, and I warn you now, you will not like it." Marcus Thorne, 7th Duke of Ormsgill, was not a man accustomed to asking for anything. He was accustomed to being obeyed, feared a little and left alone, which suited him well. But the snow was coming down in earnest against the tall windows of his study, and the woman standing before the fire had nowhere else in the world to go, and he had discovered, to his considerable irritation, that he could not simply turn her out into it. Miss Eleanor Frost had come to Ormsgill Hall on foot through the first snow of December, half frozen, to beg the return of a family miniature her late father had pledged against a loan. Marcus had bought the debt himself, months ago, without ever meaning to meet the debtor. He had expected a broken old gambler's daughter, timid and tearful. He had not expected this, a pale, upright young woman with snow melting in her lashes who looked him steadily in the eye, and said she had come to repay what she could and to ask, with dignity, for time to pay the rest. There was no rest to pay. Her father was dead, the estate was gone, and she had walked 3 miles in the cold because she had no carriage and no money for the coach. She had told him all of it plainly, refusing the chair he offered until he insisted, refusing the brandy entirely. And somewhere in the telling, Marcus had stopped thinking about the debt at all. "I do not understand," Eleanor said now. Her hands were folded before her, still faintly blue at the knuckles. "You wish me to pose as your intended bride for an evening." "For the season. My grandmother arrives Thursday. Every Christmas she comes to Ormsgill, and every Christmas she brings with her a fresh regiment of suitable young ladies she intends me to marry, and every Christmas I disappoint her, and she grows a year older and more grieved, and I cannot bear it." He turned from the window. "If I present a betrothed of my own choosing, she will be satisfied, she will leave the matter be, and she may enjoy what Christmases remain to her without her only grandson breaking her heart. That is all I want. An evening's peace, extended a few weeks. And in return, you will pay my father's debts in full, and provide you a settlement enough to live independently ever after, ball or no ball. That part is not conditional." He said it curtly because he did not wish to be thanked, and because the sight of her blue knuckles had done something to him he did not care to examine. "You need not marry anyone. You need not depend on anyone. When the season ends we part, the engagement is quietly dissolved, and you are free and provided for. It is the cleanest arrangement I could devise." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Firelight moved on her face. She was, he noted with the same irritation as before, quite beautiful when she was thinking, which she appeared to do a great deal. "You said there was a condition I would not like," she said. Marcus was quiet. This was the part he had turned over in his mind for the whole of the hour since the idea had come to him, and he still was not certain why he meant to insist on it, only that he did. "You are not to pretend affection you do not feel," he said. She blinked. "I beg your pardon." Other men in my position would want the performance complete, the doting glances, the pressed hands, the whispered nothings, all of it counterfeit for the benefit of the room. I will not have it. His voice had gone low. I have spent my whole life surrounded by people performing sentiments they do not hold. My father's house was full of it. I will not stand across a ballroom from a woman gazing at me with false tenderness and pretend, even for my grandmother's sake, that it is real. So that is my condition. You will be courteous. You will be my betrothed in the eyes of the world, but you will not manufacture a single feeling you do not honestly have. If you look at me with warmth, it will be because you feel it, or you will not look at me at all. Do you understand?" Eleanor Frost stared at him, as though he had begun speaking in another language. "That," she said slowly, "is the strangest thing anyone has ever asked of me. I am aware. Most men would demand I adore them convincingly." "I am not most men," Marcus said, "and I would rather have an honest indifference than a beautiful lie. I have had my fill of beautiful lies." He heard how much he had revealed and stopped himself. "Well, The snow is not improving. You may take the arrangement or refuse it. Either way, you will not go back into that weather tonight. A room is being made ready. But I would have your answer." She accepted. Of course she accepted. She had no other choice, and they both knew it, and the knowing sat uncomfortably in Marcus's chest as she gave him her hand on the bargain. Her fingers were cold in his. He held them a moment longer than the handshake required, and told himself it was only to judge how chilled she still was. His grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, arrived on Thursday in a great fur-lined traveling cloak and swept into the hall already talking. She stopped short at the sight of Elinor standing at his side. "And who is this?" "Miss Elinor Frost," Marcus said, "my betrothed." There was a silence in which he watched 40 years fall from his grandmother's face. She crossed the hall, took Elinor's hands in both of hers, and looked up at her with such naked, trembling joy that Marcus had to turn away toward the fire, ashamed of the deceit as he had not expected to be. "I had begun to think," the old woman whispered, "that I should die without seeing it. Oh, my dear! Oh, you dear, clever girl, whoever you are!" And she wept openly, holding a stranger's hands, and Elinor, who owed this family nothing but a debt she could not pay, bent and gently kissed the dowager's papery cheek and murmured something kind, and it was not, Marcus was quite sure, anything she had manufactured. That was the beginning of the undoing, though he did not know it yet. The days before the ball unspooled slowly, snowbound. There was little to do at Ormsgill in December but sit by fires and wait for weather to break, and so the Duke and his false betrothed were thrown together hour upon hour, and the strange condition he had set began to work on him in ways he had not foreseen. Because she would not pretend, he could never doubt her. When Elinor laughed at something he said over dinner, and she laughed more readily than he would have credited, a low, startled laugh, as though her own amusement surprised her, he knew it was real because he had forbidden her to counterfeit it. When she argued with his grandmother about the merits of a novel, taking a book down from his library shelves and reading a passage aloud to prove her point, cheeks flushed, entirely forgetting to perform anything at all, he knew that too was real. And when, on the fourth evening, she looked up from her needlework and found him watching her and did not look away, held his eyes across the fire-lit room for one long, quiet moment before returning to her thread, Marcus understood, with a jolt that went through him like cold water, exactly what he had done. He had built an arrangement in which she could not lie to him, and now he could not stop looking for the truth in her, and finding, everywhere he looked, that she did not seem indifferent at all. "You are quiet tonight," she observed. His grandmother had long retired. The snow ticked against the windows. Only the two of them remained, and a low fire and the great dark house sleeping around them. "I was thinking about my condition," Marcus said. "The one I disliked." "You did not dislike it. You said it was strange. There is a difference." He set down his glass. "I begin to think I did not make it for the reason I gave. I told you I could not bear false tenderness. That was true, but I think—" He stopped. He was not a man who spoke of himself. He forced himself on. "I think I made a rule that forbade you to lie to me because some part of me, even then, wished very much to know the truth of what you felt. And having forbidden the lie, I find I cannot now mistake the truth, which is that you look at me, Miss Frost, as though I were not merely the man paying your father's debts." Elinor had gone very still. Her needle hung forgotten. "You told me," she said carefully, "that I was to feel nothing I did not honestly feel." "I did. And that if I looked at you with warmth, it must be because it was real." "I did say that." She set the needlework aside. She rose and crossed the small distance between their chairs, and stood before him with her hands folded and her chin lifted in that way he had first seen when she stood dripping snow in his study and refused his brandy. But her voice, when it came, was not steady at all. "Then you must know," Elinor said, "that I have kept your condition faithfully, every day. I have not manufactured a single feeling. I have not had to." Her eyes were bright. I came here to beg for a miniature and to ask for time, and I meant to hate you a little for owning my father's ruin. And instead I have spent a fortnight in your library and at your table, and I have watched you be kind to an old woman and gentle with me, and I cannot. Marcus, I cannot pretend an indifference I do not feel, and you forbade me to pretend anything at all, so I am left with nothing to hide behind. That is the truth. You made a rule, and the rule has left me nowhere to stand but here, telling you plainly that I have fallen in love with the man I came to plead with, and I do not know what on earth you mean to do about it. For the whole of his life Marcus Thorne had guarded himself against exactly this, the moment when another person laid a true thing before him and waited to see whether he would honor it or crush it. He had watched his father crush such moments. He had built a cold and orderly existence precisely so that no one would ever offer him one. And now here it was, offered by a woman with snowmelt in her lashes who had walked 3 miles through the cold rather than beg dishonestly, standing before him with her heart in her open hands. He rose from his chair. "What I mean to do about it," he said, and his voice was not steady either, "is release you from the arrangement." Something in her face broke. She turned quickly away, and he caught her wrist gently, and drew her back. "Not because I want you gone. Eleanor, look at me." He waited until she did. "I release you from the pretense because I do not want a pretense any longer. The debts are paid, that was never conditional, and it stands. You are free and provided for. You may walk out of this house tomorrow owing me nothing and never see me again, and I will bear it." He drew a breath. "But if you should wish instead to stay, not as my false betrothed, but as my real one, then I would ask you honestly, as I have asked you nothing honestly until tonight, whether you would consent to be courted in earnest by a man who is only just learning how to say what he feels, and is making, I fear, a poor beginning of it." She was crying now and laughing both at once. "That was not a poor beginning. It was clumsy. It was the least clumsy thing you have said since I arrived." She turned her hand within his grasp until her cold fingers laced through his warm ones. "You forbade me to pretend affection. I could not have obeyed you had I tried. Yes, Marcus, court me in earnest. Though I warn you, I have already stopped pretending, and there is a great deal of earnest to catch up to." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, no longer blue with cold, warm now from the fire and from him, and held them there, his eyes shut, feeling the whole cold, ordered fortress of his life come quietly, gladly down. The Christmas ball, when it came, was the talk of 3 counties. The Duke of Ormsgill, famously reserved, was seen to dance every dance with his betrothed, and to laugh aloud at least twice, and his grandmother sat beaming by the fire in her best lace, and pronounced to anyone who would listen that she had known the moment she saw the girl. No one at that ball could have guessed the engagement had ever been anything but true, least of all the 2 at the center of it, who had by then quite forgotten there had once been any pretending in it at all. Late in the evening, when the snow had stopped and the moon lay bright on the white lawns, Marcus drew Eleanor out to the quiet of the long gallery, away from the music. "I set you one condition," he said, "that you would never feign a feeling you did not hold. I release you from it now for good." "Why?" "Because there is nothing left to feign." He touched her cheek. "You need never guard a single expression in my presence again, Eleanor. Whatever you feel, you may show me. I would rather have every true thing on your face, even the difficult ones, than the loveliest lie in England." He smiled, a thing he did rarely, and only of late for her. "It seems I built the whole arrangement to hear you tell the truth. I only did not know when I made it that the truth would be this." She rose on her toes and kissed him, there in the moonlit gallery, honestly and without a shred of pretense, and the Duke of Ormsgill, who had wanted only an evening's peace, found instead that he had won, quite by accident, the one thing his careful life had never dared to ask for. They were married in the spring at Ormsgill, with the last of the snow melting off the hills. The dowager lived long enough to see it, and to hold her first great-grandchild, and to say, every Christmas after, that she had arranged the whole thing herself. Marcus never corrected her. He only looked across the room at his wife, who looked back at him with a warmth he never once had to wonder at, and let the old woman have her happy story, for the true one he had come to think was better still.